Nothing in this world is as is presented to us. According to the elite, who call us all the profane, those in the darkness. That's why their symbol is Moloch the big owl, you see. An owl sees in the dark. We don't. We take the world as it's been presented to us from birth. We don't question. In fact, we're not given any clues as to why we should even question. Who would suspect, getting born into this world, that everything around you was one big lie? But that's how it is, you see. That's the tragedy of the existence we live through. It's also the Matrix. The movie was modeled after these very topics which I'm talking about right now. The Matrix was a computerized system, a system where everything that happened to the characters involved already had programmed events built into them. Every possible maneuver you could make was pre-thought like a great chessboard. The only difference is with us, the profane, you see, you don't even know you're on the chessboard. You don't even know there's a game being planned and that it's actually played and you're on it, you're in it, and you're a pawn. Those who ask for truth and phone me up will be very sincere, but I'll tell them off the bat, do you really want the truth? Because you cannot just open Pandora's box and close it again. Once that light's hit you, you will never be the same again. Your opinions, your ideas, your ideals will be drastically forever altered, and you will never be able to go back to sleep in the same way. Opening Pandora's box means you will have to act in your life. You'll have to do things in your life. If you don't, the knowledge would turn against you and actually destroy you. Many people, young people, were very bright, the ones who have escaped the side effects of their inoculations, which are meant to dumb them down, will turn to drink or drugs. The real thinkers will see too much, but they've no one to fill in all the blanks for them and explain it to them. So they start blaming themselves as to why they cannot get on in this society. In fact, they don't really want to get on in this society. They don't want to become a good, successful, killer-type person and climb over others to get to the top. And so they turn inward on themselves with the knowledge they have and try to self-destruct. So I always tell the young ones, if you want, I'll teach you how to get out of this. I'll teach you how to become constructive with your thoughts, and how to become active with your thoughts and your way of living, and how to teach other people, because we're at a critical time now. This is the last generation who will be able to talk and say and convey and pass on the wisdom that's been passed on right now. The ones coming up will have had the biggest doses of inoculations than any generation before, inoculations which have targeted their immune systems and, in fact, their higher critical thinking abilities. It's only those now who have the knowledge and who have lived long enough who can pass this wisdom on, and that will be forbidden very shortly. The bills that were passed, at least the executive orders that were passed recently in the United States and other countries, are now getting rather heavy. They want to confiscate the property and assets of anyone speaking out against this war agenda of the government. The same technique that was used in the Soviet Union is now being used here. In the Soviet Union, they called it anti-government propaganda. Anyone accused of it lost all they had. And those who seized their property, the police forces, the military forces, etc., sold it off and split the loot, the same laws that we already have in the Western world, because the Soviet model was the trial bed. That was a big laboratory, which were to be used on a much larger scale, the scale of the whole world, in fact. Mikhail Gorbachev, when he was still the president of the Soviet Union, gave his last speech to the Politburo, which has been published. You'll find it if you go back into the archives of the Toronto Sun under Eric Margolis, who was the reporter. Read that speech, because he said to the Politburo, "You will shortly hear of the end of communism. Don't believe it," he said. "We're moving on to the next phase." The next phase, of course, is the merger with capitalism, which it was intended to do from the very outset. He said the end result would be something not quite communist and not quite capitalist. What he was referring to was a system of fascism at the top, with the bulk of the populace run by a bureaucracy in a communist type manner. That's what we have now. That is the UN agenda. The United Nations was set up to take over eventually as a form of global governments. So the young people should stop beating their heads against the brick wall and wondering why they're so lonely. They can't get relationships. Can't get relationships because everyone now is dysfunctional. They're trying to emulate a style that's gone out of style. It's old-fashioned, it's gone. Because the genders have been under attack for 100 years or more to split them up, to make sure that the family unit could not survive. Government wants to be able to talk directly down to you as the individual with a television screen in your house one day, telling you what to do. And you look around for those around you, your friends, relatives, to come around and stand beside you. Well, they won't be there. They won't be there. That is why they had to destroy the family unit, because the family unit is still the embryo, last vestige of a tribal unit. It gives people cause to stand up for other things and perhaps sometimes disobey government. The same type of inconvenience they found with the religions which had served the elite so well for thousands of years to make the people obey, but the religion still had something in it which they couldn't dispose of completely. And that was that you had the choice ultimately of obeying a tyrant king or obeying your God. And that was a real nuisance to the elite, so they had to destroy religion too. It had served its purpose well for the majority, but it still had that little embryo there, that little spark of disobedience when there's a clash between government's wishes and the laws of your God, whichever God that happened to be. Margaret Thatcher, in her world tour, the tour which was called the New World Order, spoke at Massey Hall about this, about the coming wars in the early 90s. And she said it would be against religious fundamentalists. Now, she meant the Muslims, of course, but she also meant all religionists. And that meant all fundamental religionists. That's Catholic and Protestant and Jews and Muslims, everyone. The only ones that would be exempt were the passive ones, like Buddhism, because it follows right in line, Buddhism, with the new agenda for the UN of an evolutionary kind of religion. Evolution is not incompatible with Buddhism or even Hinduism. You'll find evolution came from Hinduism because that was always the higher religion of the mystery religion. In Hinduism, they start off with the primordial slime and amoebas and things that grow out of it, simply evolving through the will of Brahma to become something better and better. They actually call this evolution becoming. It's called becoming. Freemasonry is modeled after Hinduism. And Charles Darwin's whole theory, which was just taken from his grandfather before him, on the theory of evolution, was a reiteration, a public reiteration of the higher Freemasonic religion that already existed. It was an expose of it. It was also intended to be the first step to de-sacretize human beings, to get them to start to give up their thinking that they were something special, that life was something special, that others around you were sacred in a way, since everything was made by some great creator. Once you threw that out the window, put yourself in line with the animals, it was much easier to control you and justify why they were controlling you. You had less rights then to stand up for and say, wait a minute, I'm a human being. I'm a creation. No, you're just a fluke of nature. That's all you are, they tell you. And you believe it, and you've just thrown away the only defense you ever had against them. When we begin to kill at any extreme, whether it's the very young or the very old, and they always go for the weaker ones first, and we accept that as a culture, how can we possibly stand up to the elite when they say, well, there's just too many of you, you're inconvenient, you're in the way. You have no arguments, you have no leg to stand on. And that was their planning all along. In academia, many topics are allowed to be discussed, which cannot be discussed in public. And I understand why not, because some of the topics are so emotive, people can become violent over them. In academia, you must become, to an extent, dispassionate and stand above and look at something from the outside. Just look at the effects, as the elite themselves do and their think tanks do. When you start at the abortion end of the scale, for many, many reasons, inconvenience, can't afford them, again, there's economics for you, or the very fact that you have promiscuity, or whatever it happens to be. The fact is, if you kill off life because it's just unwanted at the moment, or it can't be afforded at the moment, how can we stand up when they start killing off the elderly, or want to kill off all the rest of the useless eaters that don't have factories anymore, they don't have the economies anymore, we're excess population. We've lost our ground for our arguments. And this was a cleverly planned agenda to make this so. Ancient religions, long before they were tampered with so heavily for political reasons, always reinforced that, the sacredness of life, knowing that if it was thrown out the window, hell would break loose by controllers. And the worst tragedy is, today we're so selfish, so incredibly selfish in the me generation. We don't care about other people. We don't care what's happening to other people, whether it's wedding parties in Iraq who get bombed from the air by mistake, supposedly, or people dying because they can't afford medical treatment. And all of these things in this great society, that most advanced society we've ever had, we're told, the most progressed society. If we don't care about these people, then believe you me, the big eating machine that goes around chomping at people will come round to your door in the end. You can't escape it.